Hey guys, tonight we drift out onto a liquid universe, not in a spaceship, but in a canoe made of lashed wood and dreams. The sun is long gone. The sky above is smeared with stars more than your eyes know what to do with. And below, the ocean gleams like spilled ink, reflecting the constellations like a polite mirror. There's no engine hum, no GPS, no glowing screens. Just the occasional slap of a wave, the creak of rope, and the whisper of your navigator murmuring something not to you, but to the stars. You're floating somewhere in the Pacific. No maps, no compass, just open water, big sky, and the sensation that you are much smaller than your ego thinks and also much more essential than you realize. This is not a ride you survive by accident. You're sitting in a canoe system so advanced that even modern sailors get grumpy trying to explain it. The people who created it didn't need sextants or Google Earth. They looked up, they looked around, they listened, they remembered. Which is terrible news for anyone whose short-term memory blips when trying to recall where they left their keys. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe rocks gently, not in a scary way, more like a cradle. The stars are out your ceiling tiles for the night. They've been out longer than we have. And long before they got reduced to horoscope jokes and Christmas lights, they were guides. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there's no convenient exit 53. Next Adel 20 miles sign. No helpful Siri voice chirping. Turn port in 100 meters. What you have are stories and not the bedtime kind. These are navigation chants, memorized sky calendars, sea swell indexes, and ancient rules about what it means when a booby flies north at sunrise. You pull your cloak tighter, it's not cold, just a little damp, the air thick with salt and knowledge. Your navigator is a soft-spoken elder with a face that's more creased than your grandma's couch, and eyes that look like they know where the stars sleep during the day. He taps the canoe lightly, not to get attention, more like punctuation, and he starts to whisper not to you, not even to the crew, to the stars. You think you're hallucinating, you're not. He's reciting directions in a cadence that barely ripples the air. His words aren't coordinates, they're names, directions, migrations. Whole family trees wrapped in syllables so old they feel like they've been borrowed from the wind. And you sit there trying not to ruin the vibe. Because this isn't just travel, it's ceremony. You drift into sleepiness, not boredom, just a kind of awe-saturated drowsiness that comes from feeling both immensely insignificant and totally invited into the secret machinery of the universe. Your canoe, called a waka orua, if you're feeling precise moves without effort. It doesn't slash the waves. It dances with them. Built from two hulls joined together, it handles like a dream. Stable, sleek, suspiciously elegant, like the sea is actually a partner in the voyage instead of an obstacle. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators really intended to cross entire oceans or just got lucky and happened upon island chains. Spoiler, the Pacific is way too big for accidental success stories. The odds of landing on tiny islands sprinkled across thousands of miles of open sea by mistake repeatedly and with passengers, plants, pigs, and purposeful chance. That's not luck, that's legacy. The stars shimmer overhead. The canoe creaks again, familiar, soothing. The ocean's a little glassier now. It's as if it wants to help you hear better. Because the stars aren't just hanging there looking pretty, they move. And not randomly. They rise in the east, set in the west in dependable arcs. The positions they take over the horizon, their rising and setting points act like pegs on a giant floating compass. You don't use the North Star in these parts, not really. Here, you track hundreds of stars. Each star has a role, some for direction, some for timing, some for knowing when it's time to head home. And all of this memorized. Not scribbled, not carved, just passed from mouth to mouth, heart to heart. One sleepy chant at a time. One whispered direction at dusk. One don't forget that part where Sirius rises over the second reef reminder that sounds like a joke, but isn't. And you begin to realize this isn't navigation, it's inheritance. One quirky tidbit. The term wayfinder doesn't come with a badge or certificate. You don't graduate. You become one only when the stars trust you back. Which, according to one oral tradition, means you stop dreaming about land and start dreaming in tides. That happens to you somewhere between the second swell and your third banana. You don't know what day it is anymore. The sky tells you more than the calendar ever did. You lie back, cheek against a coiled rope, and the canoe rocks you again. Not forward, not backward, just somewhere right between memory and motion. The canoe creaks again, not out of protest but familiarity. Like an old friend adjusting their seat beside you. The kind of sound that says, yeah, I've done this before. And it has. Probably longer than most nations have existed. You sit cross-legged on the planks, palms pressed to the cool wood. The surface is polished not by varnish but by generations of hands, bare feet, seawater, and time. The lashings that hold everything together are made from coconut fiber, senet, woven tight and purposeful. No nails, no screws, just engineering done by instinct and muscle memory. You're on a Waka Urua, a double-hulled Polynesian voyaging canoe, a floating sculpture of symmetry and intent. These canoes weren't meant to hug coastlines. They were made to kiss the horizon and then go past it. Two hulls for stability. A central platform for living and dreaming sails that are more wing than fabric. And no rudder, because who needs one when you have stars and a brain wired for ocean logic? Some of these canoes were big, really big. The Hawaiian Wa'akaulua could carry dozens of people, animals, plants, and enough fermented breadfruit to turn even the most seasick uncle into a loyal stowaway. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about carrying everything from point A to B. Language, customs, recipes, gods, grudges. An entire culture delicately packed in baskets and chants. You stand up slowly, not because you're being dramatic, but because the canoe gently reminds you not to rush. It sways under your weight, not scolding, just suggestive. And you walk the central plank, balancing like a toddler on a curb until you reach the bow. There, lashed to the deck, is a small carved figurehead. Not a snarling dragon or some glorified mermaid, just a stylized face, calm, watchful. A reminder that this canoe isn't just transport, it's a being. A living vessel that deserves your respect. Not like your old car, which you mostly respected when it refused to start. You sit again watching the sea unroll itself. The horizon never ends out here. There's always more blue, more shimmer, more questions. But the canoe doesn't ask. It just goes. Historians still argue whether Polynesian voyaging canoes were truly seaworthy enough to cross the massive distances from Tahiti to Hawaii or from Samoa to New Zealand. Some early scholars assumed these boats were glorified rafts, incapable of long voyages. But modern reconstructions like Hokulea have proven otherwise. Repeatedly, with zero motors, just wind stars and training. And here's the weird bit. The knowledge of how to make these canoes was nearly lost. For a time, no one remembered exactly how the lashings worked, which fibers lasted longest, which hull shape played nicest with the wind. Colonial systems didn't prioritize canoe building in their lesson plans. Go figure. But in recent decades, the knowledge was revived, not from textbooks, from memory, from a few elders who still remembered how wood bends, how cordage breathes, how sails listen. The canoes were reborn, not as museum pieces, as living relatives. And honestly, they're better than your phone. Your navigator calls to someone near the stern. The words are brief, clipped, almost like code. They shift the sail slightly. Just a breath of a movement. The canoe responds like a cat turning in sleep. Efficient, elegant, Unbothered, you run your fingers along the lashing at your side. It's weathered, yes, but it holds. Not because of one knot, but because of hundreds. Each tied by hand, each trusting the next. That's the lesson, isn't it? Strength in repetition, in layers. In tradition that's humble enough to be quiet and quiet enough to last. One quirky note: early European explorers were both amazed and totally baffled by these canoes. Some tried to buy them. Others tried to copy them. Most just described them in journals with a lot of confused adjectives. Swift alien, suspiciously buoyant. One even claimed the hulls must have been hollowed by magic. You chuckle softly. Magic? Not quite, but imagination, precision. A whole cosmos of unspoken calculation. Definitely. You lie back again. The canoe dips with you, not dramatically, just a soft exhale. You stare up at the rigging overhead, the way the lines cross like spiderwebs, perfectly planned. And for a moment you realize something odd. You don't feel like you're on water anymore. You feel like you're in something. Like you've stepped inside an ancient idea. A mobile cathedral, a poem that floats. You smile just barely, and the canoe, as if amused by your awe, creaks once more. You lie there, canoe beneath you, sky above, and suddenly it's very clear that you're sailing in a bowl of stars. The kind of stars you don't get back home unless your home is a dark sky preserve or the moon. They're everywhere, dense, bright, sharp, like glitter on black velvet or diamonds spilled across eternity. But out here, you're not just looking at stars. You're using them. You shift your gaze to the east, then north, then west, noting the ones that rise like clockwork, setting the tempo for a night that has no hands. You try to pick one. Follow it with your eyes. Memorize its angle. But after a while, you stop trying to learn the stars. You let them teach you instead. That's what Polynesian navigators did. Still do. They don't just point and say, "That's Orion." They say, "That's Ka Macau Nui o Maui," the big fishhook of Maui. A story, a direction, a guide. It rises over your left shoulder when the canoe is angled toward home. In this universe, constellations don't grant wishes. They grant instructions. You scoot forward on the deck, your eyes tracing the star path like a sleepy hiker tracing a ridge with their finger. The stars aren't just floating. Each one is on a known arc, a route across the sky. Master navigators memorize dozens of these: which ones rise where, which ones travel, which paths, which stars can be trusted in which seasons. Forget compasses. You are surrounded by celestial breadcrumbs, each glowing dot another breadcrumb home. Historians still argue whether Polynesian wayfinding was more intuitive than empirical, whether navigators felt their way across the sea or actually memorized detailed star charts. Turns out it's both. They don't write down the chart. They become it. Bihotsit. You blink slowly, adjusting to the rhythm of the sky. The longer you stare, the more it changes, not because the stars move quickly, but because you're finally still enough to notice. One star dips lower, another begins its ascent. Behind you, a whole constellation edges into view like a guest arriving fashionably late to a party that started in 1200 BCE. One quirky detail. There's something called a star compass, but don't get excited. It's not an object you carry in your pocket. It's a map that lives in the navigator's head. Imagine dividing the horizon into 32 points, then associating each direction with the rising and setting points of specific stars. You hold that entire system in your memory like a massive mental app that's never updated but never glitches. You reach out just for fun and hold your hand against the sky, lining it up with the horizon. You realize you've seen people do this. Explorers, photographers. That one cousin who always thinks they're spiritual after 2 glasses of wine. But this is different. You're not estimating. You're confirming. Because your navigator, who still hasn't opened a map or pointed, already adjusted the sail 10 minutes ago. based on a star you haven't even noticed yet, and sure enough, it's rising now exactly where it should. This isn't improvisation, it's choreography. The sky sings its part. The canoe hums back in harmony, and you're the only one still struggling to remember where Polaris even lives. You sigh and lie back down. The stars are too much to hold at once, so you let them go. Let them blur into soft points, let your focus drift. The ocean's a little rougher now. Not angry, just textured. Like it's reminding you this isn't a planetarium. This is the real thing. The stars overhead are ancient. Nuclear, fierce, but they're also gentle because they're predictable. They always rise, always set, always return. Which is more than you can say for your old roommate. You smirk and adjust your position, draping an arm across your eyes. You don't want to fall asleep. But the rocking is relentless. The quiet is heavy. The stars are whispering lullabies. And part of you wonders if that's how the first navigators began. Not by chasing destinations, but by falling in love with the sky's voice. They listened long enough, and the stars answered. The sea doesn't shout, it hums. It carries a tune too low for radios, too old for language. You've been listening wrong your whole life. Because out here, with no engine and no land to echo, the ocean finally has the floor. And it's got opinions. You sit still, very still. The canoe rocks gently under your legs and the waves rise like breaths. Not randomly, never randomly. There are patterns here. Long swells from the east, shorter chop from the side. You close your eyes and just feel it. The canoe tilts, then recovers. Tilts again. The repetition isn't boring, it's instructional. These aren't waves. They're sentences. You just don't speak the language yet. Polynesian navigators did. They could read the sea like a book they'd already memorized but liked rereading anyway. Swell direction. That's your heading. Swell layering. That's your current. Wave height. That's the wind talking, and it might not be friendly. There's a swell coming from the southeast tonight. You hadn't noticed until now, but your navigator did. Probably hours ago. That's why the sail was trimmed at that weird angle earlier. He didn't ask, didn't announce, just did. You trail your fingers in the water. It's warm. The Pacific isn't icy at night, it's inviting. Though let's be honest, you still wouldn't jump in. Not without signing a waiver. The canoe moves a little faster now. Almost as if it's chasing something. But no, it's not chasing. It's sinking. With the swell, with the wind, with some invisible rhythm only the trained can hear. One quirky thing about traditional navigation swells were given names. Imagine naming a breeze. A particular wave pattern from a particular part of the ocean might be called something like the long whisper from the shark's cave. Not for drama, because these navigators tracked swells across hundreds of miles. Some originated near far-off islands, traveled days across open water, and still held their shape, like liquid messengers. Historians still argue whether this technique was truly precise or just poetic. Did they really know which island a swell came from, skeptics ask. And then they try to sail a double-hulled canoe across 2,000 miles and end up sunburned and humbled in a marina. You let your palm press against the hull. It vibrates softly, not in a buzzing way, more like breathing. You realize you're inside a conversation, not just between sailor and sea, between past and present, between memory and muscle, between silence and meaning. Your navigator shifts on the platform behind you. His eyes are closed. You think he's napping. But then he mutters something half syllables and you realize he's listening. Maybe even dreaming in wave cadence. The canoe adjusts course again, not sharply, just a nudge. The sail shifts. The ropes groan content. And still, not a single word of command is spoken. Because wave knowledge isn't barked like orders. It's felt. You try to remember the last time you paid attention to how wind hit your skin, or how a floor beneath you tilted in the same direction twice. In this world, that kind of forgetfulness can get you seriously off course. You lie down again, not because you're tired, just because it helps you hear. With your back against the deck, the hull's voice enters you differently. You feel the roll beneath your spine, the dip, the rise, the echo of a swell that probably started near Tonga or maybe farther, pushing up gently against your entire body. The waves aren't chaos, they're braille, and the canoe is reading. You wonder what it's saying. Maybe almost there. Maybe wrong island, but good effort. Or maybe you forgot to tie something down and it's now floating away in joy. One funny detail, you learn some traditional navigators train by lying in the canoe with their eyes closed for hours. No sails, just their back pressed to the hull, mapping the world by feel. That's the entrance exam. No textbooks, no pop quizzes, just lie down, listen, and prove you belong. You smile, letting the thought drift across your mind like a distant cloud. Then you close your eyes again, not to sleep, to learn. The swell to your left just changed, slightly, but enough. You wait, and the canoe, dutiful and quiet, leans into it, like it always knew. You wake not because someone calls you, but because the stars have shifted. A constellation that had been over your left shoulder is now somewhere behind your ear. The ocean hasn't changed much, but the sky has started its slow pivot, tugging your sense of time along with it like a child dragging a toy behind them. You blink, then sit up. Your bones protest, but the canoe doesn't. It just sways patient, as if to say, "Welcome back. The night missed you." Your navigator hasn't moved. He's still seated cross-legged on the forward deck, gaze angled upward, as if the stars are talking directly to him and he's trying not to interrupt. He doesn't gesture, doesn't point, but his breathing has changed, shallow, now more rhythmic. He's measuring things, not in inches or degrees, in memory. He tilts his head ever so slightly and hums something low and droning. You almost miss it, but it settles in the space around you like fog, thick with meaning. You're not trained to understand. That's the moment you realize he's not looking at a map. He is the map. He's been memorizing not just where the stars are, but where they rise. Every night, year after year. Over time, he's built a compass inside his mind. Not a metal needle spinning in circles, but a mental ring of stars, horizon points, directions, and travel wisdom woven into chants and silence. It's called the star compass, and it's terrifyingly elegant. Picture a circle, divided into 32 equidistant points like a compass rose. Then anchor specific stars to each point, noting exactly where they rise and set on the horizon throughout the year. That's your framework. From that, you get direction. You get seasonal indicators. You get meaning. Your job, should you accept it, is to memorize it. All of it. Historians still argue whether young apprentice navigators could really internalize that much celestial detail without charts. But master wayfinders have said it plainly. You don't remember the stars. You remember the relationships, which feels like a poetic burn for anyone still forgetting birthdays. You scoot a little closer to your navigator, trying not to make it weird. He nods barely. That means you're allowed to sit, not speak, just watch. And that's when he begins to whisper. Not like before, "This isn't to the stars. This is to you." He murmurs names, not Western ones. These aren't Sirius or Vega or Regulus. They're island names. Chants. Descriptions like the blazing torch of the southern path or the canoe that waits by the reef. Each one connected to a story, a position, a purpose. It's a language with no textbook. You just have to live it. The canoe rocks slightly again. A shift in the wind. Your navigator glances once over his shoulder, then adjusts a rope near the sail with his foot. It's subtle, no drama, just a conversation between him and the canoe. A small nudge, and you're now headed a few degrees more east. Why? Because a particular star rose just a fraction off its usual spot. Which means you're slightly off course. Which means that island you can't even see yet is now back within your path. Navigation here isn't about looking for land. It's about not losing it. You reach for a water gourd. Sip. It's warm but drinkable. You imagine the thousands of voyages these people made. No ice, no rum, no novelty coconut straws. Just salted pork, fermented taro, and star directions shared between yawns. One quirky tidbit. The best wayfinders weren't always the strongest or the loudest. They were often quiet types obsessive about detail. The ones who could recall the exact angle at which a particular star rose over an atoll on a Tuesday in the rainy season 5 years ago. Memory athletes but cooler and barefoot. You look back up, and suddenly the sky feels smaller. Not less vast, but more organized. Less like a mystery and more like a library. You begin to recognize the stars that have been speaking to your navigator. You start to feel their rhythm. One sets, another rises, a cycle, a wheel, a path. You remember what he said before nightfall. Follow the backbone of the night. At the time, it sounded like a poem. Now, it's the Milky Way, which bends across the sky like a spine anchoring direction season time. You inhale slowly. Then exhale, alas. And for a moment, just a moment, you think maybe the stars looked back. The sky fades to lavender. Not suddenly, but like a candle dimming behind a silk curtain. The stars loosen their grip one by one, retreating without drama. They've done their part for the night. Now it's someone else's turn. The birds. You hear the first one before you see it. A soft, rhythmic cry far above, cutting through the pastel light. Then another, and another. Their calls are different from the night sounds. Brighter, quicker. Like morning gossip from creatures who never needed Twitter. Your navigator opens his eyes. Not wide, just enough to track the direction of flight overhead. You follow his gaze, craning your neck as a dark blur streaks across the brightening sky. A frigate bird, all sharp wings and intention. It doesn't flap much, just glides cruising on air currents like it owns them. That's your first signal. Birds are the earliest hints of land. Not because they fly toward it, but because they never stray too far from it. Most seabirds don't sleep on water. They fish, then return. So if you see them early in the day, especially multiple ones heading in the same direction, land is near. You smile. It feels like cheating. But it isn't. It's skill. Another bird, now smaller, flappier. A naughty turn. It's darting around the sail rigging, looking mildly annoyed that you exist. It squeaks at you once before banking off toward the sunrise. Your navigator watches it leave, nods slightly, then mutters something under his breath. Probably a heading change. You're learning to read these things, not fluently, but you're starting to catch the grammar of the ocean's language. Bird first, then cloud, then smell, then swell. And somewhere in there, instinct. Historians still argue whether birds were used intentionally as navigational tools or just background detail. The skeptical crowd says, oh, they probably followed them accidentally. But the chants say otherwise. Generations of oral knowledge describe birds as messengers, partners, symbols of the voyage itself. You sip from your gourd again. The water's cooler now. Morning has arrived with very little fanfare, just light breeze and birds. Your navigator points not with a finger, but with his chin. You follow his gaze. There, far off, something almost invisible, a faint vertical smear between sky and sea. A different color, a thicker blur. The kind of thing you'd miss if you blinked. But there it is. Clouds. Not just any clouds, stationary ones. Low, dense, puffier than the passing sky fluff. Land clouds. You tilt your head. That's a thing. Yep. Island landmasses heat differently than the sea. They push air upward, forming clouds that hover directly over them. Experienced navigators can spot these from over 30 miles away. You're skeptical until your navigator smiles and says, "Wait 1 hour." You do. And sure enough, the blur thickens. The cloud swells. Then under it, a line appears, darker, straighter. Land. A low atoll ringed with palms and morning birds now flooding out like commuters on a freeway. You blink, feeling weirdly proud. You didn't find it, but you noticed it. Progress. One quirky detail: some navigators kept birds in the canoe. Actual birds, like a living GPS. Near the end of a voyage, they'd release one, usually a naughty or a frigate, and watch its flight path. If it circled and came back, no land. If it flew straight and disappeared, follow it. Like analog Find My iBird. You chuckle imagining trying that with a modern passenger. Release the intern. See if they head toward Wi-Fi. The island gets clearer now. You are still a few hours away, but your course is locked in. The stars handed you off to the birds, who handed you off to the clouds, who now guide you to the scent. Yes, the smell changes. The air isn't just ocean anymore. It's greener, softer, full of hints you didn't know you could notice. Flowers, trees, dry sand warmed by morning sun. Even the salt smells different, like it's been filtered through jungle leaves. Your navigator breathes in deeply, eyes closed like someone savoring a soup. Then he opens them and nods. The canoe veers slightly, just a degree or two. Perfect alignment. You sit up straighter. You're about to arrive somewhere without ever looking at a screen. You're arriving because you listened. To birds. To clouds. To a 1,000-year-old whisper that rides the feathers of flight in the shape of distant skies. You lean over the edge of the canoe, watching the water turn shallower, bluer. Reefs appear like bruises beneath the surface. Fish dart. The canoe slows. Not because it has brakes, because your navigator gently adjusts the sail. Again, no words, just trust. You exhale, and suddenly land feels less like a destination, and more like an answer. The water shifts again, this time not in rhythm but in color. You lean over the side of the canoe and squint. The deep navy hue of open ocean fades into something dreamier, like a turquoise gemstone cracked open under sunlight. And beneath that shimmer texture, reefs, sandy bottom, coral structures jagged enough to sink the careless and beautiful enough to haunt dreams. You've crossed the invisible line, deep sea to shallow shelf. The kind of shift only someone who's been watching long enough can notice without a map. Your navigator knew you'd reached it by the sound of the hull. The way it skips just a little more over shallow resistance, like a whisper bouncing back from a closer wall. But there's another cue now. The clouds. You glance up again. The sky's mostly clear, but a few clouds hover thickly above one point on the horizon. You've seen clouds before. You're not new to this. But these clouds aren't moving. They're standing guard. Stationary cloud formations like this usually form over land thanks to the way heat rises off solid ground. The moisture lifts straight up and cools into puffy guards that sit like fluffy hints for those in the know. Navigators spotted them from leagues away and adjusted course hours before sighting land itself. Historians still argue whether this technique cloud reading was standard or exceptional. Some claim it was an occasional bonus. Others insist it was essential. The chants passed down mention clouds as breath over the sleeping god, which either means, hey, land's ahead, or the weather is drunk again. Depending on the chant, you shade your eyes and look at the clouds again. Under them, the faintest green thread peaks above the horizon, just a sliver. Could be a hallucination, could be sea haze, but it isn't. It's trees. Your navigator lets out a sound, not quite a word, it's more of a note. A rising, pleased hum, as if a symphony just hit its final chord. He adjusts the sail just barely, and the canoe glides faster. The breeze sharpens with purpose. You sit up straighter. It's working. The sky told you. The birds confirmed. The smell hinted. And now the water itself invites you. You notice the shimmer has changed. The surface isn't just blue, it's sparkling. Like there's something beneath it. That's when you spot the pale ribbons of sand, the darker reefs, and the dancing shapes of fish, darting like silver gossip. Another quirky detail, traditional navigators also paid attention to the reflection of land on clouds. Sounds fake. Right, but light bounces off islands and up into the undersides of low-hanging clouds, creating subtle color changes. Greenish tints for forests, bluish smudges for lagoons, darker shades for volcanic terrain. You squint. The clouds overhead do seem different, not whiter, but denser, as if they know they're hiding something important. Your navigator murmurs a few syllables. You don't understand the words, but the tone is obvious, satisfied. You've hit the glide path now. The canoe barely needs guidance. The wind has been correct for hours. The swells continue to push from the rear, gently encouraging forward motion. You're not steering anymore. You're arriving. And this part, it's slow, deliciously slow, because that's how Polynesian voyaging works. You don't rush the ending. You let the arrival unfold. A sandbar appears first, subtle, almost bashful, then a few coconut trees like watchmen craning their necks. Then the shape of the island reveals itself. Curved low like a sleeping manta ray with shoulders of green and lips of coral beach. And still, no cheering, no applause. Your navigator simply nods, because this was expected. One fringe theory. Some believe ancient navigators sensed islands using spiritual intuition or psychic vibes. Honestly, after the bird thing, the cloud thing, the reflection thing, and the smell thing, psychic navigation doesn't sound that far-fetched. Still, most scholars stick to wave-reading celestial memory and cloud logic. Still others say it's all just learned hyper-awareness, and maybe that's the real magic. You weren't guessing. You were listening. And the island, it was speaking. You draw closer. The wind shifts slightly as it curls around landmass. Trees shimmer under sunlight. Birds circle overhead. Some fly out to greet you, not because they care, but because you've invaded their view. The canoe slows now. The water's too shallow to maintain speed. You look over the side again. You can see the sand clearly. Ripples on the floor. A few sea cucumbers just doing whatever sea cucumbers do. The color of the water is surreal, like someone spilled sky into a swimming pool. Your navigator finally stands. No speech, no big reveal. He just adjusts one final rope, nods to you, then begins folding the sail like it's laundry day. You help. Clumsily. But you help. And the canoe slides into a gentle drift. The island, now fully visible, stretches before you like a welcome mat embroidered with palms and mist. You inhale. And somewhere deep in your ears you swear the sea exhales in reply. The canoe bumps gently against the shallows, nudging the coral shelf like a sleepy seal finding its favorite nap spot. You glance down, clear water shimmering, fish sand pale as bone. You've arrived. But somehow there's no drum roll, no shouting of land ho, no dramatic planting of flags, just silence. Because for Polynesian Navigator, arriving isn't conquest, it's communion. Your navigator steps ashore barefoot, not because he's making a point, but because that's how you feel land. With souls, with skin. He doesn't point to the beach or the trees or the rocky ridge behind them. He just walks up, brushes his fingers along a piece of driftwood and looks at the horizon again. Already thinking about the way back, you follow him, tentatively. And then once your foot touches warm sand, you feel it. The quiet electricity of being home, even if this isn't your home. It's the feeling of destination, but not finality. Because everything about this voyage whispers one truth: the journey never ends. Now, here's the strange part. You notice something as you follow him through the tree line past scrubby bushes and squawking seabirds. No one gives directions. Not once on this trip has anyone pointed. Not with fingers, not with sticks, not with anything. Why? Because pointing breaks the spell. Polynesian navigation is deeply rooted in oral tradition, songs, chants, memory, and metaphor. When master wayfinders teach their students, they don't say, "Look over there." They say, "When the morning star wakes the eastern tide, you must be ready." They'll hum a tune or recite a line of verse. If you know, you know. If you don't, you better learn. This is a world where silence is part of the language. One quirky detail wayfinding apprentices, often called PWO candidates, would sometimes train for years without a single map or diagram. Instead, they were told stories, elaborate ones, rich in image and rhythm. One chant might reference a bird that only flies when the moon is high, a fish that swims only in a certain current, or a type of rain that falls diagonally. Together, these clues form coordinates, but only if you understand the code. Historians still argue whether this method qualifies as science or art. Western standards love clear diagrams and empirical proof. Polynesian methods lean on metaphor, lived experience, and an ability to notice things other people miss, which is arguably more advanced than punching numbers into a GPS and hoping for the best. You walk through the island's interior. Your guide stops occasionally not to show you something but to let you notice it. A coconut tree with a slight lean. A nest of terns near the edge of a rocky pool. Shadows that fall in a particular direction betraying time more clearly than any watch. No words, just presence. And presence is the tool of a master navigator. You think back to the canoe, the way it responded to wind before you noticed the shift. The way the stars whispered location in arcs, not in lines. The way the birds knew land hours before your eyes could confirm it. None of that required maps. It required awareness. You come to a clearing where a few stones sit in a half circle. They're unmarked, unremarkable maybe. But your guide kneels and brushes one clean with a palm. He says nothing, but you sense it. This is a place of teaching, not a classroom, a school of stone. Here initiates would sit and listen not to teachers but to time. They'd be quizzed without questions, challenged without threats, given only clues. Stories, weather, waves, and they'd have to piece it together. One whispered chant might carry 3 different meanings depending on context. One wave pattern might mean you're headed home or you're about to miss it by 40 miles. The only way to succeed, feel it in your bones, remember it in your dreams, and never ever point. You sit on one of the stones. It's warm from sun and old memory. Your guide closes his eyes and begins to hum again, just like on the canoe. Except this time you can tell he's teaching, but only if you choose to learn. And suddenly the island feels less like a place and more like a classroom, where the sky writes the textbook, the sea administers the test, and the clouds, birds, and waves. They're the tutors. The only grade is arrival, and you're starting to pass. You stay seated on the warm stone, trying not to fidget. Around you, the island breathes in late morning heat. The fronds above whisper not to you but to each other, gossiping maybe about yet another curious visitor who thinks a stone circle is just a rock arrangement and not a syllabus. Your navigator is still humming. It's low and slow like a lullaby with too many secrets. You lean in a little and realize it's not just melody, it's data. In this chant, he's naming stars. Not their Western names, but their positions, their seasons, their rising and setting points. It's like listening to an encyclopedia, if the encyclopedia decided to be a poem and refused to be written down. You don't interrupt, you just listen. The chant eventually tapers off like mist burning away under sun. He opens his eyes slowly and finally speaks directly to you. Not loudly, not ceremonially, just a statement. You have to forget your alphabet. You blink. It's not an insult, it's an invitation. Because in this place, words are not letters, they're directions. And the direction depends on rhythm. That's how oral knowledge survives through pulse, through the body. A chant isn't a song, it's a chart that moves. One quirky thing you'll discover about navigation training apprentices would recite voyages as full-body performances, walking in circles to mirror the star compass, gesturing to invisible swells, even mimicking bird calls. Not because they were theatrical, but because memory clings better to movement than to silence. And when you embody knowledge, it stays. Historians still debate whether this form of education counted as formal schooling. There were no scrolls, no classrooms with chalk, no exams you could cheat on, just generations of human minds acting like living libraries. They say a master navigator might hold the equivalent of tens of thousands of directional cues, bird types, swell sequences, star cycles, seasonal shifts. Cloud formations all in his head. Your head hurts just imagining it. But here's the funny thing, you're starting to feel it. Like when a melody gets stuck in your bones. Your navigator motions for you to stand. You do. Then he walks in a circle, slow, precise, and stops at a certain point. He gestures to that spot with his eyes. You step there. Then he begins the chant again, this time moving slowly, pointing not with fingers but with his whole being. A nod toward the east, a slight lean to the northwest, a hand lifted when referencing the zenith stars, a palm pressed to his chest when invoking the swell from the east. You copy him, poorly, but you try. And this, the trying, is the test. Because learning navigation isn't about perfect recall, it's about alignment. Are you listening? Are you noticing? Are you quiet enough to let the world speak back? Another detail you notice when he references a star path, his shoulders shift. Just slightly, you begin to mimic that too. Before long, you've walked a full rotation around the stone circle. And you know somehow that you've just traced a star compass, without seeing a single drawing. Just your body, the sky. And this dance you didn't know you'd been learning since the first swell rocked the canoe. You sit again, heart slower now, breath calmer. The island stills too, as if acknowledging your small step. You glance around. There's no audience, no diploma, no trumpet announcing your progression. But your navigator offers a rare smile, tiny but real. It says you're beginning. You don't say anything. You don't point. You don't ask what's next. You simply rest your hands on your knees, and the silence answers everything. You sit there for a while, stone under your legs, sunlight warm on your shoulders, the echoes of star chants still dancing somewhere behind your ears. The air is thick now, not heavy but whole, like it's holding everything in place, the sky, the trees, your heartbeat, the exact alignment of clouds above the sea. Your navigator stands and stretches slowly, bones cracking like soft twigs. Then he walks toward a nearby grove. No words. Just a wave, not a beckon, but an if you feel like it gesture. You follow, because of course you do. The path is soft. Crushed coral underfoot, the occasional palm root curling across like a lazy snake. The wind weaves in and out of the trees, whispering low gossip again, and you begin to notice something odd. Nothing symmetrical. Not the trees, not the layout, not even the trail. And yet, it all makes sense. The island isn't planned, it's understood. Just like the sea, your guide stops at a cluster of trees, tall ones with thick trunks and wide leaves. Breadfruit trees. He taps the bark gently, like greeting an old friend. Then he turns back to you. Everything you need is here. You want to ask, for what? But before you can, he walks over to another tree, this one with long, sturdy fronds. Coconut palm. Ah, he's talking about the canoe. Because every part of that glorious ocean-bending vessel you traveled on, it came from places like this. Not shipyards, not stores. Here, the breadfruit tree provides the hull wood, lightweight, but strong, easy to carve, resistant to rot. The coconut tree. Everything else. Lashing sail lines, planks, cups, even the water in the fruit for long voyages. Banana leaves for wrapping food. Pandanus for sail matting. One quirky tradition. Before felling a breadfruit tree, the navigator or builder would chant to it. Ask permission, explain the journey ahead, promise to honor the gift. And if the tree creaked or dropped a branch during the request, you picked another one. Because nature talks back and it's rude not to listen. You walk among the trees, now seeing them differently. No longer scenery. They're infrastructure. They're the original supply chain. One without carbon footprints or cardboard boxes. You pluck a fallen coconut shake, adhere the slosh inside. This isn't just a snack. It's a bottle, a compass, a canteen, and let's be honest, a great weapon if someone doesn't respect your canoe. Historians still argue how large-scale voyaging was even possible with such limited tools. The idea of crossing thousands of miles of ocean with nothing but woodrope, food, and memory seems impossible, but seems is doing a lot of work there. Because they did it, repeatedly, successfully, and with style. Your guide walks you over to a flat space under the shade of a large banyan tree. He kneels beside a rock slab and begins drawing with a stick in the dirt. No words, just symbols, arcs, lines. Not a map, but a design. A canoe schematic without measurements, without angles, just flow. It starts to look familiar. The double hull, the platform, the sail with its odd triangle shape. But then he adds something unexpected: people. Not stick figures, not decoration. He draws each one in the canoe. And you realize this design isn't just about wood and fiber. It's about balance. Where the navigator sits. Where the firestones are stored. Where the breadfruit mash is wrapped and buried to ferment just right. Where the outriggers shift under stress. This isn't a blueprint. It's a social contract. Because a canoe doesn't just carry bodies, it carries stories, rules, roles, even grudges packed next to the tarot. You think about how quiet the journey was, how smooth, how unspoken rules held it all together. Every person had their role. No confusion, no drama. Okay, except that one moment when you tripped over the lashings, but let's not revisit that. This is a world where structure comes from understanding, not enforcement. And the canoe, it's a floating community. Your guide finishes the drawing and smooths it away with his palm, not sentimentally, just respectfully. Like a ritual that doesn't need to linger. Then he stands again, walks back toward the water, and you follow. The canoe still rests in the shallows, its sail now folded, its lines slack, its job done. You touch the hull. It's warm from the sun, but there's a pulse there, not literal, but real. It remembers the stars, the swells, the birds, the arrival, and soon, maybe the departure. Because canoes were never made to stay still, just like you. The canoe floats where you left it, nestled between shore and reef, rocking gently, as if humming the same chant you heard from your navigator under the banyan. The sail is still furled. The ropes hang like sleepy limbs. But somehow the canoe doesn't look finished with you, it looks expectant. Because rest isn't retirement, it's rehearsal. Your navigator crouches near the stern, inspecting a section of lashing, with the kind of attention usually reserved for surgery or tight shoelaces. He hums again, not the teaching chant this time, but a practical one. You're starting to tell the difference. He gestures toward the hull. You know what to do now. You kneel, test the tightness of a lashing, glance up. He nods. You pass. Sort of. Today's lesson. Maintenance. Voyaging is romantic until a rope frays or a hull splits. Then it's wet, cold, and suddenly very, very motivating to remember where the banana fiber cordage is stored. Polynesian navigators didn't just sail. They built, maintained, adapted. A voyage didn't begin when the stars aligned. It began with preparation. Every line, every stitch in the sail mat, every plank lashed with coconut fiber, it had to be perfect. Or close enough to survive a 1,000-mile error margin. One quirky truth. The canoe's parts were often interchangeable. A lash breaks. You fix it with fiber from your sleeping mat. A paddle splinters. There's usually an extra tucked beneath the platform, sometimes carved with designs to remind you who made it. These canoes weren't just boats, they were toolkits, repair stations, and floating homes with surprisingly decent storage. You and your navigator work quietly side by side. The language of fixing is universal: frown, tighten, grunt in satisfaction. At one point, you both pause to sip water from a gourd and you realize you're enjoying this. Not because it's glamorous, but because it's yours. You helped fix it. You helped sail it. And now you help prepare it again. Because voyaging never ends. Historians still argue about how permanent these vessels were. Some say they lasted years, even decades. Repurposed, rebuilt, reborn. Others insist they were temporary, made for one journey at a time. The truth likely lies between. Built well, cared for constantly, and treated as partners, not objects. You look over the side again. The tide has risen. Not dramatically, just enough to make the hull sway a little more. The canoe senses it's almost time. Your navigator ties the final knot, then sits back. Sighs. Looks toward the open sea. No words again. But the message is clear. Soon. And you're okay with that because now the canoe isn't a mystery. It's a friend. You felt its bones adjusted, its muscles read its silence. And that kind of intimacy, it's hard to unfeel. You spend the rest of the afternoon gathering supplies, carefully, mindfully, not hoarding, preparing, breadfruit packed in banana leaves, dried fish strung in neat loops, coconut water in carved-out shells sealed with resin. You learn to tuck everything into place with the same logic you saw drawn in the dirt: balance, access, respect. Nothing is tossed in. Everything is invited. You pause at one point to adjust a rope. The sun catches the water just right, and suddenly the hull's shadow stretches out like a wing. And in that moment, you remember something. These canoes flew, not in air but across seas. They were the first airplanes of the ocean. Light, fast, designed to slice through water with less resistance than most modern boats. Some could reach speeds up to 15 knots, which translated means fast enough to beat your uncle's fishing boat. And yet, they made no noise. They left no wake, just a ripple of presence barely whispering to the waves. "Excuse me passing through." Your navigator sharpens a shell tool beside you. No rush, just muscle memory. His hands tell stories too, ones you're slowly starting to hear. By sunset, everything is ready. The canoe rests prepared. The sail is bound. The stars are not out yet, but you feel them waiting just behind the pink sky curtain, ready to light up and remind you who you are. You sit beside your navigator sharing a meal: salted fish, breadfruit mash, water. Simple things, powerful things, like chance, like hulls, like stories passed down not because someone told them, but because someone listened. You exhale. Tomorrow, you'll launch again. But tonight, you honor the stillness, the quiet work, the heartbeat of a vessel that has carried generations and now carries you. Night stretches itself across the island like a warm, familiar sheet. The stars come out slowly, not in a rush as if they're testing the air. You lie on your back again near the canoe, arms folded under your head, watching as the first pinpoint lights flicker into place. They don't twinkle out here with no city glare to compete. They glow. Constant. Direct. Watching. The sky isn't decoration. It's instruction. Your navigator sits cross-legged beside you, humming softly. Not to himself. Not even to you. Just to the stars. A greeting, maybe. Or a roll call. Because these aren't just stars. They're colleagues. Coworkers in the business of direction. He nods toward one. You recognize it now. The one that rose behind your shoulder the first night at sea. You smile. The star smiles back. Well, it would if thermonuclear plasma had emotions. More appear. The eastern sky fills first, then the zenith, then the horizon lines. And suddenly, the star compass you only glimpsed before starts to rebuild itself in your head. Segment by segment. One star per direction. One chant per quadrant. The circle reforms not on paper, not in the sand, but inside you. You whisper a few of the names. Your navigator doesn't react, but the smile behind his silence is louder than applause. Now comes a harder part. He hands you a small stick and points to the sand. Without instruction, you know what he wants. It's time to draw the compass from memory. Your hands tremble a bit. You start with east, the star that's easiest. Then northeast, placing a different star there. Then slowly around the wheel. 32 divisions, names, angles, rising points, setting lines. Your mouth moves with each one. Quietly, rhythmically. It takes half an hour. When you finish, your navigator crouches beside the drawing. He doesn't correct anything, doesn't speak, just leans forward, touches one point, then closes his eyes. It's the approval you didn't realize you needed. One quirky training ritual. In some traditions, navigators had to build a mental compass while blindfolded. Their mentors would call out wave directions or star names, and the apprentice would turn or point accordingly. Fail and you start over. Succeed and you're halfway to mastering the sky. Historians still argue whether this level of memorization was achievable for most people. Was it innate genius or just brutal practice? But there's growing evidence thanks to revived traditions that, yes, it's very possible. Given time, respect, and zero distractions from TikTok. You smooth the sand over your compass with your palm. Not because it's wrong, but because it's not needed anymore. You built it once, now you'll carry it forward. Your navigator stands and begins walking toward the canoe. The moon has risen now, fat and soft, casting shadows that stretch like whispers. He boards without ceremony, checks the lashings, adjusts the sail. He's not asking. He's going. You follow. Again, always. This time it feels different. Last time you were a passenger. Now, you're crew. You step onto the deck with more confidence. Your hands reach automatically for the ropes you helped tie. You know their feel now. Know how tight they need to be. How much wind the sail likes. How the hull groans when it disagrees. The tide has come in fully. The canoe lifts from its cradle of sand and begins to float again, light expectant. You push off. Just like that. No trumpets, no logbook entries, no launch countdown. Just the ocean saying welcome back. The stars arrange themselves overhead like an airport runway, each one blinking its coded approval. The canoe slices forward smooth as before. The wind fills the sail with a low sigh. And here's what's different now. You see it all. The swells from the east, you feel them under your spine. The breeze angle. You smell the shift. The first bird call before sunrise. You already know what it means. You aren't navigating by accident. You're participating. The canoe doesn't need to be steered constantly. It needs to be understood, responded to. Watch the way you'd watch someone you care about who won't tell you what's wrong. You just know. You pass the island's reef, leaving behind the trees and stone circle and silence of sand. Open ocean again. Same ocean, different you. A memory floats up your first night on the water. Confused, useless, hoping for stars to spell it all out. And now you smile. Because the stars never changed. You did. The canoe hums beneath you, barely skimming the surface as if the sea has softened its waves in respect. The moon leans west now, casting a long silver pathway ahead your unofficial runway. You sit near the bow this time, not for better view, but because you know that's where the birds will be spotted first. Your navigator doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You both hear the same water feel, the same wind, watch the same stars. And yet he does something unexpected. He hands you the tiller, just slides it into your palm with the quiet gravity of someone passing over an ancient bone flute or a family heirloom held together with ritual and coconut husk string. It's not ceremonial, it's trust. You don't panic. Okay, your pulse jumps a little, but you remember this isn't steering like a car. This is responding. The ocean speaks first. You answer after. Your hand tightens slightly. The tiller flexes in reply. The sail catches the moon breeze with a contented exhale, and the canoe shifts, adjusts, accepts you. That's new. That's earned. The stars above are still steady. Your favorite one. Yes, you have a favorite now winks just above the eastern horizon. You align the canoe subtly, watching the reflected starlight dance across the ripples. You're not aiming for a dot on a map. You're aiming for continuity. The voyage itself is the destination. And that's when the swell changes. Slight. Just a twitch. But you feel it in your ankles and your spine. A long, slow curve from the northeast. You glance left, then right, tracking it across the hull. The canoe nods to it like a greeting. That's the new current. Time to adjust. You pull gently. The tiller resists, not angrily, just inquisitively. You coax, it yields. The bow turns a hair's width eastward. The sail shivers, then catches again. The canoe is pleased. One quirky practice of traditional wayfinders when seas got too rough or unpredictable, they would sometimes heave to not in surrender, but in patience. They'd set the sail to stall the canoe, letting it drift safely while the navigator listened to the sea sometimes for hours. Not sleeping, not eating, just watching, waiting for the rhythm to reveal the way forward again. Historians still argue whether this practice was superstition or sound seamanship, but considering these voyages crossed open ocean without modern instruments, there's an argument to be made for listening as one of humanity's most underrated skills. You're listening now. To the wind, to the sail, to the canoe, to yourself, and somewhere you realize you're not replicating the path of the ancestors. You're becoming one. You glance over your shoulder. Your navigator watches you not sternly, not proudly, just watching. Like a teacher who no longer needs to correct. His eyes reflect the same stars you're guiding by. He nods barely. It's more than approval. It's invitation. You adjust course slightly again. Not because something's wrong, but because it feels right. The stars above have shifted a sliver. A new constellation rises off the port bow, one of the seasonal markers. The new season is coming. And with it, new winds, new islands, new stories. You exhale slowly, then glance at the horizon ahead. It's still dark, empty, unknowable, but not scary. Because now you see the ocean not as distance, but as memory. Carried on the backs of clouds, reflected in the bellies of birds, whispered between each swell. And you're not just hearing it, you're singing back. Dawn stretches its fingers across the horizon, slowly unclenching the night. The stars don't vanish, they fade. Not suddenly, but with reluctant grace, like they're yielding the stage to the understudy they don't quite trust yet. You watch them go one by one, your tiller hand steady, your eyes flicking from sky to sea and back again. The sea is glassy now, not flat, just respectful. Each ripple holds memory. Each swell remembers the way your canoe cut through it last night. You shift your weight slightly to adjust the balance. The canoe responds smooth and silent. Your navigator hasn't spoken for hours, not because he's withdrawn, but because he's watching. Every movement you make, every lean, every breath when the wind shifts. He watches not to judge, but to remember. Because teaching isn't always about adding more words. Sometimes it's about stepping back and letting someone steer into their own knowing. You scan the horizon. Nothing yet. Just the usual suspects. Sky, sea, wind, birds. But then, a sound. Faint, high-pitched, insistent. Birds, lots of them. Your stomach tightens slightly, the good kind of tight. Like opening a sealed letter with your name written in familiar script. You point your chin toward the sound. Your navigator sees it. He nods. Correct. You shift the tiller. Just a hair. The sail flutters, adjusts billows again. The canoe leans into the new heading like a dog catching scent. The birds aren't just noise. They're message. A rising cloud bank begins to gather in the far distance. It's small, puffed like cotton. Not threatening, not dramatic, just stationary. Your heart lifts. You know this game now. Birds and clouds and shimmer and smell. Land is coming, but not fast. That's never been the point. You check the sun's position. Mid-sky. Its angle tells you it's nearly the end of the second watch. You drink some water, the gourd cool against your lips. Your body feels tired but good, like muscle that remembers. One quirky ritual on long voyages. Some navigators would tie tiny feathers to the lashings of the hull feathers from different birds, each representing a direction or an island or even a mood. When the wind shifted, the feathers would twitch, dance, or lie still. It wasn't magic. It was an analog dashboard. But prettier. You wonder idly what your feather would be. Probably some confused seabird with excellent enthusiasm and questionable coordination. A puffin, maybe. Do Polynesians even have puffins? Probably not. A laugh escapes your lips. Your navigator raises an eyebrow. You shrug. He doesn't ask. The canoe glides forward smooth as ever. And then the smell hits. Not suddenly. Like the stars, it eases in. Green. Floral. Faint smoke. Something cooked. You inhale deeply, eyes closed. You could identify that island by scent alone now. That's not fiction. That's skill. That's exposure. You've logged the smells the way others log coordinates. You catalog them by memory, not map. Historians still argue whether navigators used scent deliberately. Some say it's poetic hindsight. Others say it's a logical extension of their hyper-awareness, but oral chants speak of the wind that wears the flowers of home, so yeah, it's real. You open your eyes. There, on the edge of vision, a dark green line against the blue. No longer a maybe. No longer a guess. Land. You say nothing. Neither does he. There's no need. This part isn't surprise. It's confirmation. Arrival is always in the plan. But here's the twist: you don't feel done. You feel ready. Ready for the next one. The next cloud, next bird, next swell whispering, come see. Because you now understand what every stone circle chant, every night watch hum, every awkward paddle slip was really teaching. The ocean isn't something you cross, it's something you join. The island rises higher on the horizon. The cloud above it grows thicker, fuller. The birds fly faster now, darting ahead like impatient scouts. Your hands tighten on the tiller, not out of fear, out of affection. Because this time, you know where you're going. But more importantly, you know how. The island grows not in haste, but in clarity. What was once a smudge on the horizon is now textured trees, rising in swaying clumps, rock formations jutting like brows over coves. A shoreline beginning to curl and gesture. The canoe glides closer, steady and sure, as if it remembers the way from another life. You ease the tiller and feel the response ripple through the hull. Behind you, the wind lessens, sensing its job is nearly done. Even the sail seems to relax its belly, softening like an exhale. Your navigator rises. He does not clap. He does not praise. He places a hand on your shoulder just long enough to say what no words will touch. You nod. It's understood. The shoreline is near now, and you begin to see the subtle details you would have missed weeks ago. A particular shade of blue near a reef shallower than the rest. The way the birds arc to avoid a jagged bluff that juts into the bay. A line of trees bent slightly inland, shaped by consistent wind. You're reading this coastline like a paragraph, not guessing, reading. The canoe glides into the calmer lagoon waters with almost no sound. It slows naturally, responding to the drop in swell and your gentle hand. A welcome committee of flying fish skips across your path. A lazy seabird overhead lets out a single half-hearted screech like it's been asked to work on its day off. You smile. This is arrival. But also something else. You turn back to the open ocean, the path you just came from. It's not gone. It's not closed. It's inviting. A slow-breathing mirror that says yes again. Soon. One quirky truth: some navigators would never speak of their journeys afterward. Not because of secrecy, but reverence. The voyage was sacred. Naming it reduced it. Better to live it than let it rest like an honored elder who prefers silence. Historians still argue whether this silence cost us valuable records. They debate what was lost in the lack of written logs, but others say nothing was lost. It was simply carried person to person, chant to chant across generations. You step off the canoe onto the sand. The ground is warm, firm, and yes, slightly wobbly under your sea-trained legs. The wind brushes past you, carrying the scent of flowers and smoke. In the distance, a group of people gathers, neither surprised nor rushing. They saw the birds. They read the clouds. They knew. You're expected, not as a guest, as a continuation. You walk toward them slowly, your footprints shallow in the sand, quickly erased by the tide. The canoe behind you shifts, bobs once more. It's not finished. It's just resting. Because the ocean never closes, and neither do you. And now, with the sail furled and the stars dimmed, you lie once more on a soft mat beneath a sky that hums with memory. The ocean, ever patient, sighs against the shore like a giant exhaling in sleep. You feel its rhythm in your chest, gentle and slow, matching your breath. Above, the constellations begin their quiet rotation, not demanding attention, but offering presence, still watching, still guiding, just in case. You trace them with your eyes, not to learn now, but to remember. Everything you've been taught, the chants, the clouds, the birds, the currents, rests somewhere inside you now. Not as facts, but as feelings. Not as data, but as direction. You know what it means to listen without expecting answers. To see without looking. To travel without maps because the map is you. The island around you rustles with sleep. Palm fronds sway like lullabies. In the distance, a single fire crackles. Not loud, not bright, just enough to keep the shadows warm. You pull a thin cloth over yourself, not for warmth but for comfort, for ritual. And as your eyes begin to close, you hear it faint, deep, eternal, the heartbeat of the canoe resting in the lagoon. Still floating, still dreaming, still waiting for the next whisper from the stars. Good night, Wayfinder. You've come far. You are home. And the ocean will still be there. When you're ready,